to meet you. Thank you for the great welcome. I'm really humbled and honored to be here. You all collectively are, is that too loud? Okay. You all collectively are bringing so much to the community and to Austin in the spirit of education and communication. I had the ability to sit down and meet with Dean Johnston and talk a little bit about applying the art of continuous improvement to healthcare. And that's my profession. That's what I do. I'm a continuous improvement a professional, and on the way to finding solutions and helping organizations improve, I encountered this technique of requirements gathering, elicitation. If you hear the business analysis book of knowledge, right? When you say that, you're supposed to go like, oh, right? Because it's all supposed to. It's actually this edition right here is really a very good one. The one before was flimsy and not a great asset, but this one's worthy of being on your shelf. I want to start out with a little story, a funny story, a true story about a company who provided power lines. So they transmitted power in Alaska from city to city, right, over these vast distances. And what happened is, you know how the weather is getting more extreme, more polarized, you know, the hotter is getting hotter and the colder is getting colder. And so what was happening in that particular winter is it was snowing heavy. And then during the day, the sun would melt the snow just enough so that it would turn to ice at night. And so these big, huge power lines that were stretching across the countryside were getting heavier and heavier with all of these layers of ice. And all of a sudden, they started to snap like twigs. And, you know, just repairing one of these is like, I don't know, $135,000, right? And so their profit and really their financial feasibility was going out the window. And the CEO and all of the engineers were in a panic, like what were they going to do? And so they said they gathered everybody together, all the engineers, and see if anybody had an idea, and they didn't. So then they benchmarked all of their other companies that had the similar model, and they didn't know what to do either. So then they decided that we're just going to call everybody into the lunchroom and just see if we have a massive brainstorming session, because if it goes on any further, we'll all be out of a job, so we're all stakeholders in this. But then the CEO, as he put it out, paused and said, except Fred. Don't tell Fred about it in the basement, okay? Just let Fred do what Fred does, look for his staplers and things like that. He's kind of better off in that one because he always comes up with the most insane ideas that usually gets us off base. So the staff said, okay, no problem, boss. So we'll call everybody in right after lunch at 11:30. So they all get into the room and they start to talk about the problem. Fred goes upstairs to buy a soda and then notices that oddly, everybody is gone from the entire building. He never got the memo, right? So he's looking around, wondering where everybody is. Finally, he goes up and finds everybody packed into the cafeteria. He hears about the problem and he says immediately, oh, I know what to do. And the boss, the CEO doesn't call on him, right? It's like, anybody else? Does anybody else have an idea? Oh, pick me. And he's like, no, because you, okay, what is it, Fred? And he goes, bears and honey. What we'll do is we'll hang honey underneath the wires on a little like a bucket. And then the bears they're all over the place in here in Alaska. The bears will climb up and try to get to the honey and knock off the snow and ice. Oh, and there's like a groan in the crowd, right? and everybody's shaking their head, right? Like, oh, that is the dumbest thing we ever heard, except for one engineer. And he says, well, wait a second, I'm a sports person. That idea about the honey and bears, no, that's silly. That is, but having the vibrations and knocking off the ice, that's not a bad idea. We can do something there. Says, so what I'm going to do is, what I propose is that we hang targets underneath all of the big power lines, and then me and my buddies go four-wheeling with high-powered rifles, and we'll shoot the targets and cause the vibrations to be able to knock off the snow and ice. And another engineer is like, oh, Paul, that's a terrible idea. But you're onto something, because it's right to do the vibrations. It's right to try to knock it off, especially right after it snows. But maybe what we could do is, instead of riding around with high-powered rifles and shooting at targets in the middle of the wilderness, now that's not smart. But what we could do is we could hire a helicopter, and fresh after it snowed, we could fly over and knock the snow off with the downdraft and the vibrations of the helicopter along the entire route before it turns to ice during the night. And that's what they did, and that's what saved the company. So, so the moral of the story is, right, don't keep Fred out of the room, right? The moral of the story is don't dismiss ideas that initially may seem crazy or even dumb, because what it does is it sparks another idea, sparks another creative notion, sparks collaboration and discussion, a lot of times that come up with solutions that we never really imagined. And a big part of elicitation, a big part of requirements gathering is imagining the possible, imagining what can solve and address the needs of the customers, and then capturing that, and then endeavoring to bring the ever-changing technology to bear in order to be able to provide that value. We start with one of Doug's favorite cartoons here, right? Where the customer needs a swing, right? So when the customer explained it, it kind of turned out like this, right? Because customers often have a great deal explaining what they need to business analysts. Sometimes we seem like we're speaking a different language. And also customers are kind of still connected to the old system and the old way, right? So here's how the project leader understood the swing. Here's how the engineer designed the swing. Here's how the programmer wrote it out and coded it. Right? Here's how the sales executive described it. Here's how the project was documented. Here's what operations installed. Here's how the customer was billed. Here's how the help desk supported it. And here's what the customer really needed. Right? So it's like a game of operator as it goes from one level and layer to the next, often changing and sometimes convoluting what the actual true need was. I have a mentor, Daryl Rayner. Some of you may know him in the community. He teaches, he's my course director for the project management course for the PMP prep. And he says that that most of the time your customer can't fully explain what they really need. And that's often obscured by what they think they want. And then he says sometimes that you are able to have a customer that is able to fully explain it, but the BA doesn't fully understand it. But sometimes the customer is able to explain it, the BA is able to understand it, but it's not really effectively written down and documented as it passes on this value chain, right? And then sometimes, according to Daryl, the customer is able to explain it, the BA is able to understand it, and it's effectively documented for the rest of the team, but then the customer changes his or her mind, right? So elicitation in business analysis is both critical and elusive, right? It's the pulling of information from the stakeholders. It's about discovering requirements, and it's about the work to understand and identify potential solutions and to be able to meet those needs, right? And that's from this book right here, right? Oh, right. So, but elicitation is tough, right? It's one of the most difficult stages of analysis, according to the University of Missouri, right? And there's communication barriers that exist between the analyst and the client. Often it seems like we have different languages, right? One technical and the other more business oriented, more program oriented. And it's also very error prone due to the unpredictability of human nature in communication, right? And it has other challenges. You probably know that conflicting requirements. There might be assumed requirements that one side or the other believes are there, right? Might be difficulty in getting everybody there for an elicitation. Maybe very time consuming because you're going one elicitation after the next, and then you have to back up and talk to another stakeholder. Sometimes there's a resistance and a clinging to the old system and the old ways, and a resistance to the change that's there. And a lot of times, this is what we see a lot within healthcare, education, and government in the public sector, are convoluted processes built by accretion. Now, what is accretion? Accretion is like the silt on a riverbed, right? One year it rolls out, and then the next year, another layer of silt rolls on, another layer of silt. So that's the processes that are built up all the time, not necessarily streamlined at all, right? But it's just accumulated all the time. And in 2002, we had that audit. In 2003, we had that review from the federal funding source, et cetera. And we just built these processes by accretion. But it's not necessarily something that we want built into the new system. Right? They're not necessarily valid requirements, especially 10 to 15 years later. And also, elicitation is the point of failure, a grand point of failure, right? The cause of many project failures, right? With often incomplete, incorrect, and inconsistent requirements, dooming a project to failure. And the impact is, my teenager's favorite word, ginormous, right? The estimated amount is a huge amount of potential loss. Now, match that with this, okay? So this is the Standish Group study, right? Looking at what they call as very large software projects. I spoke to someone involved with it in 18F, and they said that approximately $10 million. I have the study if you want it, right? And this is the result here, right? Successful is, we were just talking about project management, right? On time, to budget, to scope, right? With the resources that you were entrusted with, right? And not exceeding or breaking any of those, right? Look at the successful number, 6%, right? Then, and these are over $10 million very large projects, right? Then you look at the number of challenge projects, right? More or less poor implementation, something that we wouldn't be proud of and involved quite a bit of rework, right? In our industry, right? In information technology in the public sector, what they call defects. In the private sector, we call rework, or do it again, or it needs another review, right? Send it back through the loop. And that involves considerable work there in challenge projects, but perhaps something can be salvaged here. And then the one that shook me when I heard it, which then when 18F was speaking in the Capitol over here, and I was able to attend their lecture. And that's when I went and found the actual study. I communicated with them to get the actual study. This is shocking. So according to their, they call it the chaos database, which has all of these projects registered from all these type of institutions. and groups and companies, et cetera. 42% are total scrap, right? With a little less and the rest all caps, right? Meaning that you can't use nothing. That project was canceled and you had to go out for bid again, or you had to make it again from scratch, and it was useless. And I mean, is there anyone in here that's not shocked by that, right? And even if we kind of knew it, right, it's still shocking because it's so much money, right? It's ginormous. The waste is ginormous, right? Holy enchiladas. So that's the number of failed projects that we have, right? So elicitation, very difficult. Elicitation, critical. Elicitation, the point of failure. And you're looking at the results of the point of failure. We've got to get it right. We've got to get it right. But how do we get it right? When we're getting it wrong so often, we're smart people. We understand this. We've got great degrees. We're the highest advanced technology, and we've got so many people, so many programs, so many students, so many professors, so many systems depending upon us that we need to get it right more often. What if we could truly capture the customer's needs, right? Find the intent and not get caught in the trappings of the functional features, the buttons. Be adaptable and flexible to IT advancements. So it's not chattel slavery for our vendors who come in and are making bids because they're tied down by the requirements that we have. Why can't our requirements be transcendent in nature, right? But still have sufficient detail so that the vendor understands what the customer needs and can achieve that. How do we collaborate and communicate to create? Right. What is the forum that we want that creates that more lucrative environment to be able to pull requirements? How do we design a streamlined future state and get rid of a lot of that waste that gets clogged up in the system over time? How do we provide IT with a blueprint? I love the word full kit. So how do we provide follow-on IT, right? Because as BAs, we are the face of IT, representing that whole world that projects back all the way through the developers, all the way back to the folks that actually build the systems. And how do we provide them full kit, everything they need to be able to move forward with the project? And finally, how can we be successful and holistic in nature and do it timely? So it's not like we've got 347 IT people to talk to, stakeholders to talk to, and we'll just do this in 90-minute increments and we'll be done in no time. How do we avoid that? Okay, so here is what we encountered, maybe even stumbled upon, right? Is that when you utilize these 7 steps, you get the most vivid representation of what the new system can be and will be and needs to be. So let's take a closer look, right? So first, IT chartering, no change. So if you're familiar with the PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge, right? If you're familiar with that, no change in terms of the charter, right? It's got scope, what deliverables, what the objectives are, milestones, etc. Okay. The second is this newcomer to the field and makes it dramatically different. It's what good looks like, right? We're imagining what is possible for the customer. We're imagining them optimizing their work environment, right, as we reach in and start to envision this new system. I had a boss once that was from Mississippi, and he used to say wise things. And one time he said, if y'all can't imagine it, y'all will never be able to do it, right? So that's the idea is here. Let's imagine what good looks like. Then we use the tried and true elicitation system of mapping the current state. But when we do so, we harvest requirements. Because the people that work in the actual system, they will start, when you start to map, they'll start to relive their processes. They'll start to relive the trials and tribulations of what goes on. Like mini work PTSD starts to happen inside their brains when you start to pull those requirements and track it on a value stream map, and they start to tell you where the decisions are and where they queue up and where they pool, etc. And then that's a wonderful time to start pulling those requirements from them. Plus, they'll be full of ideas. Now, some of the ideas can be met by current technology, but some won't be able to, but we don't know. In fact, if we knew at this moment whether or not current technology could do it, 5 moments later, we don't know, because it changes just that quickly, right? So in some cases, folks that have used this system have thought that they need to spend $15 million, but ended up buying a better system that met their needs better for $8 million. And then here, we need to gap it. That when we talk about the analysis and the analytical capabilities that business analysts need to have, that's where we're talking about gapping, right? What's the difference between what they have and what they need, right? And that difference between the two, that subtraction exercise, is the gap it. Then we build the integrated system, right? In our mind's eye, we start to put it together and start to design that. We'll show you a technique to do that, actually easy technique. And then we launch it. We present the future state system to the stakeholders and to leadership, everyone that has a role in it. And then we move into implementation, continuous improvement, and implementation of the project, however that might unfold, whether we make it or whether we buy it or whether there's a hybrid. Okay, and here's the deliverables that are associated with each of these 7 steps, right? So we have the charter, no surprise. Something called a strategic compass, which I want to introduce to you. Very effective tool of capturing what good looks like, imagining what is possible. Then we have the value stream map. You're all familiar with the flow chart. And we keep an action item register. So as those ideas, notions, creative suggestions pop up, we can capture those well. And then we have the interference diagram, another thing I'd like to introduce you to, another tool that's there. To be able to gather all the interferences, all the challenges, obstacles that the team currently faces. And we begin the process of requirements gathering, which is actually accomplished throughout, right? We start that document right away, and we start to build on those requirements and start to refine those because those are going to be the basis of our specs that have the technical background and language to be able to turn it into code. And then we want to build the integrated system, create mock-ups. I love mock-ups. Nothing gets into the brain of a customer and then projects it into the brain of an IT developer like a mock-up, right? So we've historically kind of stayed away from that. I don't want to figure out like what this looks like. I don't want to presuppose anything for the IT professionals, but it gives them great potential on the other side of the mock-up facade to be able to use whatever is out here to be able to satisfy what the customer wants to interact with. And it doesn't have to be true. It can be better, but at least we have no light in between the customer and the IT professional when we do mock-ups. And I'll give you some examples. And then we have the strategic path, which puts it all together. That's the document that was out. If you haven't seen it, or we got copies coming, I don't know, but if you haven't seen it, share it with somebody who hasn't. When we come to it, just pass it around. And then we'll be able to see how all of this comes together. And then we have the presentation slides and commitment. So I'm a big, so as I mentioned, I'm a retired commander and Army colonel, and I love dog and pony shows. It was like reared into me, right? You can't run a Pentagon without dog and pony shows. So how do you gain commitment from folks? How do you gain their understanding that this is the new system? And in doing so, you begin to get widespread consensus that this is the direction that we need to go. It's also a great time to celebrate the great work that people have done in being able to gather all these requirements and put together this new vision, right? And reward them. So here's an example of something that that we have done, that I have done, and you can see the different elements that are there. This is actually from that launch presentation to senior leadership in Michigan Department of Transportation. This system that we're going to talk about, our example, is they need a new system to be able to do the permitting for oversized and overweight vehicles. And they need a new system also, we discover, to tie it in so that the ever-changing bridge height is also real-time and available to everyone within Michigan. All of the engineers, all the construction crews, and all those people hauling around those big, huge wind turbines, right? So that all that information is real-time and we have safe highways. So we need a new system that we need to create. So here's the new turn improvements. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? The low-hanging fruit of improvements that the team is just going to do. They're just going to start improving right there. They're making videos, data collection sheets. This is the major interface, what I call the mock-up of do I need a permit wizard? We'll look briefly at that. And here's the future state value stream map. And then we built the ideal state requirements spreadsheet. And then we put it together in a visual way that we call the strategic path. So we start with something called a SIPOC, which I thankfully took from Lean Six Sigma. It's called R&D, okay? Rob and duplicate, right? When everybody's got a good suggestion, we can rob and duplicate, right? And that's why we need the intra net so that we can all communicate effectively. But basically, it's just a way to black box and break down your organization. Hello, Dash. And here is kind of where we're at within the 7 phases. Right here, we're early on in the vision statement. And people love doing a SIPOC exercise because they know all the answers and it's fun and exciting, right? So they're able to identify who gives them money and authority, who tells them what to do, what their processes are, their outputs, and then their customers. So it's a fun exercise. It brings the team together, gets them through the sort of storming and forming part. And then it invites the question, the SIPOC invites the question of what is our goal? So Boaz Ronan is a continuous improvement professional from Israel and teaches there at the National University. And he says that, that we underestimate goals, and that goals provide the context for all the work that we do and all the decisions that we make way down deep within the organization. And we like to use this example from Alice in Wonderland of where she's walking along the path. All of a sudden, it breaks into like 5 different subpaths and, you know, at the fork in the road, and she doesn't know where to go. And thank goodness there's a talking cat that's right there that she can consult, right? So the Cheshire Cat pops up and she says, well, which way should I go? He says, well, where are you trying to get to? And she said, I have no idea. He says, don't worry, take any of the paths, because any of the paths will get you to I don't know, right? So if our people don't understand the goal, we don't understand the goal of the project and the process, right? We can't make those good decisions along the way. So this is called a strategic compass. It was developed in the theory of constraints. It is the most simple portrayal of an organization that really portrays the organization, right? If you get any more simple than this, and you really can't put it on one slide, and that's the whole point. The whole point is to get it on one slide so that it becomes fathomable to people who are looking at it. It's also a great document to share people who are like the 2 Bobs in Office Space, right? What is it you say you do here, right? So, so here you can see this is the goal of this particular shop is to provide Michigan a timely, accurate, user-friendly, and safe permits in an efficient and compliant manner that enables prompt transport along viable routes to destinations safely. So Greta, when we were talking earlier, that's one of the first questions that I would encourage in an elicitation is, what is your goal? And it's good for them to come with their own words, right, at the moment to answer it, and not go rummaging around some website to find their mission or their vision or something like that, right? Make sure it comes from the heart. Then the next thing that we do is we identify these major steps in the process, right? These are the major steps, the key activities is maybe another good way to say that. And you notice how one of them is turned red here. They know which one is red, right? So you can ask them, what's the bottleneck? What's the constraint? Because in the theory of constraint, the way it works is we say that the flow of value that goes through this process is only as great as what is constraining it at the weakest point, or the soda straw, the tiniest conduit that what that value goes through. And that's what causes this value over here to be issued or not issued timely and safely. And so then we talk a little bit about what good looks like going into and out of the constraint, because the way the theory works, if we improve this, we improve all of this as a system. Then the last thing that we do is we invite an analysis of metrics. If this process is working well and improving over time, how will we see that? How will we know? If we're here and we were gonna move up here, what kind of ways can we graphically portray that improvement over time to be able to move up? So again, it has a beginning and an end. It identifies what goes through the system. It identifies the major key activities, and then it identifies what the constraint is. If we were going to pull a chain between you and I, one of those plastic chains like in the movie line, and we were going to pull it until it snaps, where would it snap? Maybe in the middle. What if I cut the one of them a little bit, right? So that it's at the weakest point, might be, right? And both of us pull it together, and the weight of the chain, it might be very much the weakest point could be in the middle, right? But the same idea here is that let's find what the constraint is, and then let's make sure that that's improved first. So this is another version of that, an IT version of another example here. This is EduTech, right, in North Dakota. And you can see that their goal is to provide leadership in world-class education technology services to maximize the success of and value to pre-K through 12 communities and stakeholders in North Dakota. You can see their major processes here. Okay, you can see they identify their bottleneck in their critical activity, and we've captured sort of the necessary conditions for success and those key metrics. Just another example. Okay, now we move into the mapping portion of this. Right here, we move into the phase where we map it, and we are mapping the current state, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the worse, right? Warts and all. And during this one, you can't see it right here, but the companion document is two documents. So one is the action item register, which says what we want to do or improve or change, and the other one is the requirements. Often one leads to the other, and they reinforce each other. You can see here that this team got to busy themselves. They got so excited about the project that they thought initially was about a new system once they get the millions of dollars that it was going to cost the state of Michigan. But then they realized that they could do a lot themselves in the short term. So they put together a data collection worksheet so people didn't time out when they went out to their truck to measure their boat. And then they did tutorial videos so that they would reduce the amount of useless time, wasted time spent talking to people when they could watch it on video and learn how to do their basics during the application. They benchmarked other states and learned what was possible. They focused on the biggest and most difficult of the traffic that also causes the most difficulties on the road and accidents. And then they focused on their stakeholders, the engineers in the field and their bridge. I just wanted to point there that you know, this is a collaborative exercise, that there's communication and the stakeholders are part of it. They're not a passive element of the elicitation. It's very active. And here is one of the best tools for interference diagramming, one of the best tools for elicitation gathering, which is interference diagramming, right? And the way it works is you put the goal here in the middle. Okay. There's another, you know, tradition that says the goal should help you achieve your core objective, which is your blue line. Then you put all of the obstacles all around it that folks have. Often it's a very cathartic experience for the people that are working, right? They identify all of the challenges that they have that in some way impedes their contribution to their mission. And then we brainstorm for solutions and write them down. And we'll pass out stickies at that point and ask them to be able to capture how they would address that. Then before we leave, we ask what the team is resolved to do and what the new system should look like based upon the thoughts that were shared during the interference diagram. And boy, is it dense. And it's intense too. And you can watch it on the YouTube video right here. You can see there, don't be disturbed by that ugly mug, right? But right here, you can Google interference diagramming video. There's like a 1.5-minute video. And then there's another one that's full 32 minutes. But what you can do is assign it to homework before an elicitation, before a requirements gathering. And then the people will get a good feel for it. It's kind of like flipping the classroom, right? They'll get a good feel for it. And when they come in, man, they're going to be ready to go, right? Watch it, though, because sometimes it gets kind of emotional, right? Especially in the public sector, we care so much about what we do. Sometimes it gets emotional. Wah. So that is what it looks like after you put the goal in the middle. That's where we started. Then we put all of the different challenges to it, and then you can see the handwritten. See how they're all different handwritings there, right? So those are from the participants themselves as they came up with solutions and ideas to the challenges that they have. Really rich way to gather requirements. And that's when it looks like cleaned up. We use Visio for that, but you can use a variety of applications. And then you can do, you see how the low-hanging fruit was identified there, what we can do now or in short order. There's all the challenges and then all the ideas and solutions that are there. And boy, that'll fill out a requirements worksheet. That'll fill out a requirements spreadsheet. Right? So here, I just wanted to highlight a little bit so that you can see the technical aspect of this, right? So they wanted the new system to be able to send a hyperlink to review a read-only copy to the engineers, maintenance, construction, and to get their comments. That should have an eye in it somewhere. And then pull a report based on the route number and the type of superload authorized, right? It's because some of these issues are like now. Like we've got 15 wind turbines headed for a bridge that's too low, right? How do we address that now? And so they needed to have a system that was real time and responsive to that need. Run a report, so the reports will come out of there, and also visibility. Better visibility of underclearance and some way to track the hits. Because right now, the Michigan police might respond to a bridge hit, but it doesn't make it back to the people who are issuing the permits. So they need to close that loop. And then read-only access to the engineers. These are the engineers, the regional centers right here, right? Standardized, underclearance, et cetera. So they need a good system to be able to meet those. Now, also the systems, and this should be part of your elicitation, should be how we measure it, right? Tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I'll behave, right? And don't measure me in an illogical way through this system and the application and expect me to behave in a logical way for you. So part of your system, connected with your system, part of the psychology of the new system needs to be measurement. And I really believe that it also needs to be very visual, not just a bunch of numbers on a screen, because that doesn't trigger our creative response. Our eyes are hardwired into our brain. And I actually think we think differently when we see challenges portrayed visually than when we see them portrayed either in narrative or in numbers. So you can see, and so these are just two. I'll let you look at the next one real quick. So just two for a pretty complicated process that serves the state, right? Just that's everything that they really need in terms of dashboard. It's got quality, productivity, customer satisfaction, timeliness, all built into it, displayed as elegantly as the team could. And you can just see here, it's got the number by type there, the permits that it has. It's got the fourth quadrant, so what's happening in the transport companies, the experience that they're getting. Production, they wanted to see production by FTE and try to figure out E. We're always trying to figure out E, right? And then here you can see here, this is communication measured. So what happened, you can see this group here communicates that they set up a restricted area and a construction zone that would be dangerous and sometimes lethal if a oversized vehicle goes through. And their average, they communicate that about 5 days after they set it up. Right? So 5 days after they set up the restricted area, and they have to untangle a lot of semis carrying a lot of dangerous things. Okay, quality review, and then deficiency loops. Deficiency loops being the rework that we see in government. Just another vision of this. This is payday law investigations, and you can see how, in a simple way, they could see their, their throughput, the average amount of days to be able to do that tied together. So it doesn't have to be very complicated. It doesn't have to take a lot of effort or a lot of time collecting data in order to build a good dashboard. Here's an IT dashboard built by the director for IT in South Dakota. And she wanted to compare the number of projects that she was doing with the actual, what we call velocity, or the adjusted for the size and magnitude and ROI of the projects. And lo and behold, she discovered that her team was actually improving over time. But when she was just counting projects, she had no idea here. She would look at something and it have a velocity of like 78, but only giving herself credit for 39 or the reverse. So here's an example of elicitation. I'm sorry, this is a elicitation, but this is in the form of a mock-up, right? So the way that it works is we realize that there's a huge amount of people who don't know if they need an oversized permit and are glutting the system with phone calls and attempted applications for permits, et cetera. And they discovered way down later on that they really didn't need a permit. So we want to get them out of the system as soon as possible. Then we have customers that really do need a permit, but they don't know how. And then there's customers that actually need the superload permit as well. So it's a visual of what the new machine, the new system should be able to accomplish for them. And then this is entirely a mock-up, right? It's thinner than this piece of fabric right here. There's nothing beyond it. It looks real, but it's not. It's not a website, right? But the team designed it. And they designed what it wanted it to do here. And you can see that I know that I need a permit, and then the customer sent to the permit page, but I need help. And the customer goes to the wizard page. And the wizard page helps them out, right? Sees what kind of road they're going to travel on. And they're either told to contact local government, and then this doesn't exist yet, but the new system will guide them wherever they're going to go and tell them you're going to be going through these county roads and these county bridges and this city area, right? So that's part of the visualization. So as we gather those requirements, we're like, well, we need to have a plug-in, right? And some of the leadership was like, oh, I don't want to be managing those cities and other things. And I said, well, you have to manage them, but they have to know where to go, because right now they don't know where to go. And they just infiltrate when they discover they can't use a federal highway. And so it continues based upon, you walk the customer through, do they need a permit, do they not need a permit, based upon their size and then their weight to be able to go through, and then finally be able to use the restrictions here, which are a bit more in that state because of the the permafrost thaw or something like that. I don't understand it. Has to do with it destroys their roads when it thaws if there's an overweight vehicle at a certain time of the year. Here's another mock-up. So this mock-up was for an attorney's office. The attorney wanted to be able to pull in and designed a portal for them. So again, these are not real. This is just a Word document, but it listed out all of the needs here, even some of the sub drop-down menus that were had here, and all of the summary of the request. When did this matter arise? Who brought up this matter? Do you need to speak? Is it about a legislative inquiry? If so, I need to know this information right here, etc. And then we even have somewhere on here like the frequent flyers that auto-populates, right? For those folks that are always going to their attorneys and needing legal reviews to be able to design. And then with this document in hand, the agency was able to decide whether they needed to make a make or buy decision. You got to go. Am I over my time? I'm over good. Okay. When do I go?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. Okay, good. I'm on track. You go right ahead. I didn't mean to stop you. Okay. It's good to keep track of time. So you see how this unfolds? So the attorneys, there was elicitations conducted with the attorneys of different types, right? And they said, this is what I want my drop-down menu to look like. This is who I serve, etc. And then we built the mock-up menu, and then we gave it to the selected vendor. And when the vendors came in as part of discovery, this was in the hands of all of the program and the agency internal IT. And they're like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this right here? Can you do this? And if you can't do this, then go. If you can do this, let us know. And then we'll buy you. And it was like, I mean, it wasn't that easy, but it was pretty good and pretty easy, right? And then there were no confusion in terms of expectations. Like, we bought you because you said you could do that, and you ran this really cool demo. Anybody ever seen really cool demos? And then you buy it, and it's like, why can't you do what the demo did? And they go, oh, that's our sales team. Did you not remember the cartoon? Right? That's what we sold. Just a little close-up of those same areas and how those drop-down menus worked. Very effective way. They ended up with ServiceNow. Don't know if that, I mean, they're pleased with it. But they knew right away that that's what they wanted. So here's a requirements capture, right, with the stakeholder needs, some addressing the different aspects of the organization and what it was going to have. And then you can see it's not a short document, but we built it over time there. And you notice that it affects all of the 7 areas that we have. Okay? And so these are just excerpts from the document to show, we need to have our feedback incorporated into the system, right? We need to be able to see each other's approvals in the system. Because right now we can't. They're all standalone in silos, et cetera. And there's the report writing that we saw from the interference diagram, et cetera. This one is really, I mean, it kind of gets nitty gritty right here, right? So this is describing the interface that's required with the county so that we notify them that if you're still going to go in this route, you're going to be going through these counties, and here's the contact information for those counties. So that nothing falls through the cracks between the state and the county. So this is for the launch presentation. It's kind of giving a highlight of the major changes of the new system. That we're going to have browser compatibility, which currently the only thing that you can use is Internet Explorer if you want a permit in Michigan, right? And then using the wizard and maybe some enhanced automation so that we can automate some of these basic permits. And ability to save and other usability that we discovered when we did a session, a focus group with the stakeholders, especially the big trucking companies, and then integration of metrics like you saw on the dashboard. So this is called an improvement diagram, right? Where we increase the customer awareness on restrictions around zones. We identify height and weight restrictions so that we know the bridge heights, and then we optimize mobility, and we enable trooper enforcement. And all of that will achieve the governor's objective. Her objective is to have 0 deaths on the highways of Michigan this year, right? So the new system needs to do that. So when you see the next slide, you'll know that all of these are components of it. They're key elements and aspects of that. And this is the one that you have, or you can pass around so that you can see that it can be legible to this. This is called a sufficiency-based logic, right? If I do these three things, then that'll enable this. If I do these things over here, then that will enable a quality and functional user experience, right? And that may need multiple browser capability. That may have mobile app chat back. It may have the trucker can now listen like you do on Siri or your MapQuest to tell you where to go. But now the idea is that the new system will enable truckers to listen and be routed so that they can go to Safe Bridge, to another Safe Bridge, et cetera, at the same time. So this is just a review slide of the process deliverables. You see the SIPOC, strategic compass. There's the value streams for the current state, which become the blueprint to be able to do the future state here, a more elegant, streamlined system that more closely approximates what we want to purchase or make. We see the interference diagram, which gave us those requirements, and then we see the strategic path here. And so now, just open it up for questions and discussions. This is the Deming cycle, plan, do, study, act. So I'll leave you with that thought.
2 minutes left. One great question. How about that? Anybody? What is that? You ready?
Yes.
You gotta ask the question.
Oh, all right.
All right, great.
Oh, no, nobody got it.
Can you show the SIPOC again?
Sure.
You can just talk into it.
There's a sign-up sheet going around, and I'll send out any materials available.
Stay alert, stay alive.
So make sure you're on the sign-up sheet if you want access to any of the extra materials and stuff. I don't know where it is. It's around here somewhere.
Yes. Is that the one, or do you want the next one?
This one, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
So I will get Alfredo's slides and I'll send them out to everybody. Also, this session is being recorded. I'm gonna stop